I mean, for me, digital transformation is really related to making the physical world smarter.
There were some surprising impacts on our business and on, I think, probably secondhand and resale broadly as a result of COVID.
Anything that digital becomes data, data fuels artificial intelligence makes digital experiences and omnichannel experiences even smarter and better.
Welcome to Behind the Numbers Brand Anatomy, an all-new eMarketer podcast that looks under the hood of your favorite brands, made possible by thredUP. It's Wednesday, November 10th, and I'm your host, eMarketer Briefing Director Jeremy Goldman. Today we have a special edition episode for you because I recently flew over to Lisbon to walk the showroom floor of annual technology conference Web Summit 2021. While I was there, I got to speak with both established brands like Levi and Siemens, and also newer ones like thredUP. We start the episode by listening in on my conversation with Chief Information Officer at Siemens, Hanna Hennig, where we discuss digital transformation and how quickly in-person events may or may not come back.
Yeah, my name is Hanna Hennig, and I'm the Chief Information Officer of Siemens.
It's a pleasure to be talking, and I think this proves that I'm a technology nerd, is that there's a Swedish singer with 6.7 million followers out there, and I'd rather be talking to you.
Wow.
You know? It's a good compliment, hopefully. But
impressive, thank you.
Yeah, so first, quick question, just your impression of in-person events. We're speaking at Web Summit 2021, and attendance down, I think, 40% or so, but still 43,000 people, during still a pandemic. So, does this mean in-person events and tangible, rather than virtual is back in some capacity?
No, I think it's a great thing that we have this event after 1.5 years or 2 years of COVID time. So I think people are enjoying it. You can see, they are thrilled about being able to meet other peoples. And I think what you can see is, what you can feel is this vibe around getting acquainted with people which you have never met. And this is, I think, really the advantage towards virtual meetings, because in virtual meetings, you exactly know who you meet. But when you go into personal meetings here in exhibitions, events like Web Summit, you get these impulses which sometimes you have never thought about, which you cannot plan. And this is exactly which also helps you with creativity, with innovation, I think.
Which is a really valid point, especially since you're in charge of essentially fostering digital transformation internally and externally at Siemens, right? For clients, but also internally. How do you define digital transformation? It seems like a lot of people define it in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, for me, digital transformation is really related to making the physical world smarter, which means that, all the hardware we are experiencing, being your car, which is now electrified, if you're driving maybe a Tesla instead of a Volkswagen in the past, where actually you have much more comfort maybe that you had before. It's like, shifting getting away from gears to automatic, and now you basically go to full electric, where you are also guided, and your autopilot is downloaded via software to your car, instead of you need to go back to the garage to have it all done via a hardware adjustment. And I think this is exactly for me what digital transformation is about. It's really about putting the so-called IT information technology layer on top of the OT, the operational technology, which is predominantly hardware and embedded software in there. But this is where we now need, where digital transformation basically is also allowing you to provide different business models. Like, for example, you are able to offer service instead of basically selling your assets, right? And Netflix is a good example of it, right? Instead of having to buy your CD or your DVD in the past, you basically get the service now streamed to you. So this is what is really enabled only via the digital transformation.
You're at this interesting juncture, like I mentioned, where you have the ability to foster digital transformation on behalf of clients, but also to do it internally with Siemens, which is, I think it as a company, like 150 years old?
Actually, 172.
Wow.
So yes, the digital transformation is our theme. We have always been a technology company, but we are ourselves going through this transformation of moving away from a hardware player. I mean, we have been since several years. We have been also acquiring software companies. We are also building our software. We are number one in simulation software, for example. So, and automation software in factories, etc. So it is really truly now our topic to combine both worlds, hardware and software. So we call it this, combining the physical with the virtual world, and this is exactly happening with our products. So we are delivering automation for the production lines, both in our own plants, for example, where we have 120 overall worldwide, and whatever we implement there as a solution, we can also offer to our customers externally. And the same is true, for example, for our buildings. Right now, we have implemented Comfy. It's actually one of our portfolio products for smart buildings. You can book your own desk. You can also manage your temperature, your blinds, etc., all virtually via one app. So that app we have now implemented worldwide in all our premises for all our employees. And this is a very good reference for our external customers to see that we have proven that technology works using this, we call it customer zero approach. We prove that our product works on ourselves and basically show it and demonstrate it to our customers externally.
A lot of people have talked about, what role the pandemic played in their, digital transformation journeys. I think that actually talking about how your digital transformation leads to a stronger brand overall, brand perception, getting, the right people in, all of that, I imagine, is helped by digital transformation. But what are the net benefits to Siemens as a company by investing in digital transformation?
I mean, first of all, we are driving also the theme of sustainability very much. So we believe strongly that technology will highly improve our sustainability targets. So be it using energy efficiency systems for plants, factories, our buildings, So, or basically having e-charging stations set up for our car fleet. So these things are basically where digital transformation is driving our sustainability targets and also achieving these targets. So that's definitely one thing. The other thing is obviously that with our own digital transformation, as I just alluded with the examples, proving, so to say, the pudding in terms of our product portfolio is where we are obviously then also showing to our customers externally that we can empower them with digital transformation tools so that they can conduct their own digital transformation.
Yeah, and it also seems to me from a net benefit from an investor standpoint, this is something that more and more consumers, which obviously are investors, I mean, you have large financial institutions, but it just seems that you want to invest more in companies that are smart, that are empowering digital in all the different ways that can transform. But I know you're also doing that from a clean tech standpoint and thinking about carbon emissions and how to invest in clean and renewable, tech. What can you say about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if we were not concerned about how we are perceived as a company into society and where we want to take responsibility, we would have not issued our degree framework, which is really about whoever is buying our shares can be sure that whatever we are committing to, we also deliver. And we also are prepared to be measured on our delivery.
To make sure that I understand, you want to be held accountable. That's part of why almost, you subscribe to these standards, because you know that there's a record of it. It keeps you honest, essentially, and keeps you guiding in this direction.
Absolutely, because we are a firm believer that sustainability must be core of your business. And we believe that you can do business with sustainability and meant in a positive world. Yeah, that means that our products are there to really help solving the pressing issues, of the world and of the society. So yes, we want to be held accountable, and we want to demonstrate that we are a reliable company and partner for our customers, shareholders, partners, whoever.
It just also seems to me that the benefit to this is starting to be there for companies. It's that there was a point where sustainability and ESG, these goals were set by companies and they didn't necessarily see the consumer care as much. It's almost like there's now, beyond just the ethical reason, there's a financial incentive for companies to do something because they will be rewarded by the markets, by the consumer, by the buyer. No?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, and maybe it sounds like a sad thing, right, that we discovered a couple of years ago. But reality is, and honestly, this is really built into our societal system. Who would have thought that you need to actually have a price for CO2 emissions? So that people are starting now thinking about it to actually avoid it, because you want to reduce your cost, right? So it looks like that we need to build incentives into our systems.
Maybe just to kind of wrap up, we talk about this financial incentive to do the right thing. Not that that's the only reason why you're doing it, of course. But, can you give a breakdown of Siemens' plan to reduce its own carbon emissions over the next 5 years? I know that's something we talked about on stage yesterday. Might be interesting to hear.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, as I say, it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint, because there are things which you can influence directly, and there are things which you cannot influence, immediately. And we call it in the sustainability terms Scope 1, Scope 2, and 3. So Scope 1 is basically anything which you can directly influence within your remits, and this is where our target is that in 2025 we have 20% less basically carbon emission than so far, and in 2030. We want to be actually CO2 free. This is Scope 1. Scope 2 is with our suppliers. And this is where our target is that by 2050, we are CO2 free with our supply chain.
I think that's a great optimistic point to end on. And we'll do a follow-up in 8 years and 2 months to see how it went, right, for 2030. But Hanna, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me here, Jeremy.
Next, I speak with President of thredUP, Anthony Marino, about how the pandemic reshaped our view on secondhand clothing and sustainability.
Yeah, hi, Jeremy. It's Anthony Marino, and I'm the president of thredUP.
I know we were just kind of talking about the crowd here. I mean, do you think that says anything? Are events, back, or is that a little bit overblown?
It's been a little while since I was around 43,000 people.
Same. Yeah.
So I'll admit it took a little bit of an adjustment, and I'm surprised. I mean, I think maybe the conference planners just caught the universe when everyone was just about ready to bust out, and so they all came here. So it's great. It's great to be here, though. It's great to see.
Yeah, one of the last things I did in person was in SF, actually the same conference as Madeline, 5 months before COVID. So
Yeah.
it's crazy how much things have shifted.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that the secondhand market was helped in some way by COVID? Was there some kind of headwinds that affected things and pushed it in a certain direction?
There were some surprising impacts on our business and on, I think, probably secondhand and resale broadly as a result of COVID. One of the things is that people were home and they were looking at all of the stuff that they had in their closets. So whereas they may have been running out the door in the morning, now they were home all day realizing they had too much stuff and that they were continuing to buy too much stuff. And so it definitely got people interested in, well, what can I do with all this? And is buying the same way I've always bought the right thing to do? So nearly 1 in 2 consumers who we've interviewed post-pandemic say they actually care more about value, they care more about sustainability than they did before the pandemic, which was a surprise to us, because you would think that when you're at home and when you're worried about your finances and your family and your health, you don't have time to think about the planet. But people did have time to think about it.
It was really interesting to me, according to your recent fashion resale market and trend report, that over the next 5 years, the secondhand market will, double to $77 billion, which is, obviously a lot of growth. But then I think that there's almost like a mercenary thing from a brand standpoint to think well, then how much of that, what's the market opportunity for you? Because obviously there are other players in this market, and how do you capture as much of it as possible?
Yeah, and that's just in the U.S. It's very much a global opportunity. So if you add Europe and the U.S., it's about a $51 billion market this year, growing to about $115 billion. So it is a very large market. And I think the way we think about it at thredUP is it's 2 really simple parts of the strategy where we focus on the customer. The first is just to make it really, really easy for people to send us the clothing they're no longer wearing. Just make it simple. People have closets full of stuff, and if you give them a bag or give them the ability to fill up a box slap a label on it that we send them for free, get very excited about the fact that they can ship that stuff out the door. On the purchaser side, the shopper side, just making sure that we have the most amazing selection of high quality secondhand clothing across the brands people love at prices they feel like are a great value, and in a predictable way. You don't have to sort of be unsure every time you go to the site, like, will thredUP have posted new clothing? They know that every day we're posting hundreds of thousands of fresh listings. And so that those, I think, two simple principles of making it easy for sellers and making it really fun and rewarding for buyers will help us get a good chunk of that market.
You mentioned a little bit about sustainability as being something that's it's obviously very tied to this, and we're talking at Web Summit, when the COP26 has been happening, and that's in the news. But from a sustainability standpoint, I know this a bit, but maybe it would be interesting for people to hear. What's the rationale for resale? I think people don't necessarily realize how much waste goes into the fashion market at large.
So if we were to just sort of hit pause on this moment and be able to look in the closets of every person in America, we would find 9 billion individual items of clothing that they never wear. So, and I just did a talk here at Web Summit, and I asked the audience, hey, raise your hand if you have clothing in your closet that you don't wear, and 97% of the people raised their hands. So there is a lot of waste, and the worst route for that waste to go is to go from your closet to a landfill. And so I think one thing everyone can agree on is that the current model of sort of buy, wear, and dispose is not a good cycle. It creates mounds of waste. Oh, and by the way, and a lot of that stuff is like new, and even some of it has the tag still on it. So it's not as if those 9 billion items are all worn threadbare and you're like, you know what, I just can't get another wear out of this thing. It's quite the opposite. It's ready to get back out into the world again, into the hands of someone who will appreciate it more than its original owners. And I think, look, the clothing industry is a big waste contributor. It's a double-digit consumer of carbon budgets. There's a lot of production waste.
It's interesting to me. This is just something, I mean, you work with these people who create the waste. And yet I think it's obviously a very compelling part of your message, the fact that you're combating this. I mean, how do those brands feel? I mean, I imagine they might look at you and say, well, you're helping us do better, but also it's interesting how you're kind of also citing the problems within this industry.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not breaking the news here. These are facts that have been, in the public discourse for some time. I think what's different now is that maybe people are listening a little more than they were in the past, and I think we've all experienced this socially and with family and with friends. Like, people actually talk about the environment. They actually talk about how they live and how they purchase. And so while we work with brands, particularly for our resale as a service platform, which is where we actually power circularity and resale experiences for brands, we're all on the same side. We're trying to build great businesses, serve customers well, and have a positive impact. And I mean, thredUP can't do it alone. So we've got to work with across the industry to make change happen.
How do you convince people when you basically say that COVID was not a blip, but it was actually something that accelerated the growth of resale in the secondhand market?
Yeah, so a couple different things. So the data is clear. COVID accelerated awareness of all the stuff you have. It accelerated awareness of alternatives for fashion where you can save money and be sustainable, and resale is an incredible solution for that. But COVID may have been a blip, but if you just look at who's shopping secondhand, you start to see why we're so confident and optimistic about the future. So, and during my talk, I talked about who are these people who are buying secondhand product, and the answer is it's everyone. If you're 15 years old or 75 years old, you want value, you want to shop sustainably, you want the brands you love, you want the fun and the treasure hunt experience. But what gives us so much hope for the future is that the younger you get, the more secondhand you shop.
And it's also interesting to me, I was looking at some of the data. it looks like there's a huge opportunity with men in particular, because it seems there's just more awareness of this market and more penetration right now with women, which is like, that's just 50% approximately of buying, give or take. So that's another opportunity.
When we see nearly half of our Gen Z survey takers tell us that they purchased a secondhand clothing item in the last year, we know that the future is bright because they're setting the standard. And when you have a whole generation of consumers for whom shopping secondhand is second nature, that fuels your growth. And even now, people's minds are changing who may not think secondhand is so cool, because if they have a good experience, if they come to thredUP or another site and they buy an amazing item of clothing and it comes and it's a great deal and it's in great condition, and at least in thredUP's case, when they take it out of the box and wrap it out of the tissue paper, it feels like, wait, this customers almost forget that it's a secondhand item, and we love to give them that rewarding experience because it means they'll come back again.
What's also interesting to me about this is, as you're thinking about like those negative connotations, it seems, I think, hitting the nail on the head, it's a little bit generational, because I feel like our generation, there was a little bit of like it was a little counterculture, if you went to a thrift shop, right? And then now it's a little bit of a, well, I can find good stuff, why not? And there are obviously other brands like a Rent the Runway comes to mind that's just creating this type of awareness with, it's actually okay if somebody else touched this product before.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the stigma is slowly wearing off, and young people drive the trend. Older people are getting the message. And look, when you see celebrities talking about thrift, when you see Christian Siriano designing a New York Fashion Week runway line that has used clothing in it, when you see Netflix series having the designer and the stylist for the show buying secondhand product for people who are on the show. We did an Emily in Paris partnership where Eric Damon did this. And so there's all these kinds of things that are encouraging people to give secondhand a second look. And
I'm sure you've used that before.
I just came up with that on the spot.
I swear. You have to reuse that. That's actually pretty awesome.
That's my jet lag working for me, I guess.
There you go.
I'm going into like deep brain here.
It's like doing an interview on one drink versus 5, right?
Yes.
But how many items approximately is thredUP processed to date? I'm thinking about, how do you kind of measure your impact? Obviously, you've got your financial data, but then your net impact on society data.
Yeah, sure. So we have upcycled, I think as of now, approximately 125 million items. So that's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of clothing. By the way, the carbon impact is significant.
Oh,
it's significant. Yeah, that's a lot of clothing.
I thought the resale as a service offering, I'm not sure what percentage or if you break that out and kind of like, but to me, as I was looking into that, it seems like this is a natural way for a company like yours to grow and to scale what you offer and to have more impact, but obviously to do better in the process.
Yeah. So let me, I'll sort of let your listeners know kind of what resale as a service is. So resale as a service is actually a pretty new part of our business. And we work with brands and retailers to actually power resale experiences for them. So we're doing this with Madewell right now, where you can go to the Madewell site and you can purchase secondhand denim, and all of that is powered by thredUP. The inventory, the pricing, the photography, the item attribution. It's actually really simple. We've designed our platform so the brands can just plug into it. We populate the site with inventory. They layer in all of their brand DNA, and they start to make money immediately by tapping into the inventory we have of items from their brand. So so resale as a service is a rapidly growing part of our business. We don't break it out yet. It's a real validation that brands want to figure out what their resale strategy should be. So oftentimes some brands come to us and they're like, we know what we want to do. We want a resale site. We want a circularity program. Let's go. Others come and they're like, okay, like help us understand like how this works, who this customer is. And they kind of get the message really quickly when they see that they can acquire new customers by selling used items. And when you look at all the data, and many retail executives know this, when you ask customers, hey, like if your favorite retailer sold used clothing next to new clothing, would you buy more from that retailer? And the customer response is, hell yeah. And the hell yeah is whether they're buying a luxury product, whether it's Gucci or whether it's a value product. So consumers have a real desire to purchase secondhand product. It doesn't matter what the price point is. And so brands are seeing this and they're saying, well, if this is a $33 billion market in the US growing to 70 plus billion over the next 4 years, how do we get a piece of that rather than sit it out? And thredUP is here to really help those brands not sit it out and to come up with a strategy that works for them. One of the reasons why I'm here at WED Summit was to introduce European brands and retailers to resale as a service. And so we'll see.
Well, hopefully all of our listeners will, help. Every little bit counts. All right, we'll take a quick break for a word from our sponsor, thredUP, and then we'll be right back with another conversation from the event.
Gone are the days of brands spilling money into one colossal advertising campaign and then hoping it performs at scale. All advertising is going digital. All digital is measurable, and therefore all advertising is performance. Is your brand ready to rethink media, to rethink advertising, to rethink agencies? Rethink performance with thredUP, the largest independent performance marketing firm across streaming TV and the triopoly of Google, Facebook, and Amazon. Find out how at rethinkperformance.com.
For my final conversation, I got to speak with Chief AI and Strategy Officer at Levi Strauss & Co., aka Levi's, Katia Walsh, about data and how it's all around us.
Hi, I'm Katia Walsh. I'm the Chief Strategy and Artificial Intelligence Officer for Levi Strauss & Company. So this is a role that's fusion of many different things: strategy, digital, data, analytics, and artificial intelligence. We shorten it to strategy and AI, otherwise it's a mouthful. It's probably one of the first such roles in the world across any industry, but not the last. And the reason for that is that anything we do with technology, with digital, with data, with analytics, with AI, has to be in service of the vision and the strategy of a business or organization. They're wonderful tools, but at the end of the day, they have to help us achieve the destination we are headed to.
When we were talking about that destination, how can artificial intelligence and machine learning transform the omni-channel experience in a way that, as they say, delights customers and gets them coming back?
Well, Levi's is all about delighting fans. It's not even customers, because the beauty of being a brand that has been around for 168 years is that we literally have fans. We have been in the center of culture and democracy and freedom. And in terms of how technology can help us with the consumer and fan experience, it's nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to do something online today, or I'm going to go to a physical store. It's really about what people are seeking to achieve, whether it's for fun or for work or for something else. And we want to meet our fans wherever they are. It can be online, it can be online in a mobile app or in a website or in a chatbot, whatever the experience is, or it could be in Instagram, everywhere, all the channels that consumers use, we want to be there, or it could be in a physical store. But of course, we want that to be seamless. We want the brand to show up beautifully everywhere, and that's where technology can help to create that seamless experience throughout.
I mean, how omni-channel is the customer? Is your customer truly omni-channel, or do you see the digital consumer, operate in one way versus the customer who prefers to almost exclusively interact with you in person?
The world has been digital for the last quarter of a century. Most people in the world are omni-channel.
I feel like there's a little bit more innovation and not, an entire pivot to D2C, of course, because you have a lot of strong third-party, partners, but certainly to have a little bit more of a direct relationship with the customer. And I'm wondering, what are the advantages of that? And then also kind of how can first-party data play a role in allowing you to serve that customer better?
As I mentioned earlier, we want to meet our consumers and fans wherever they are. And of course, direct-to-consumer channels give us that opportunity, but so do our wholesale partners. We have a very successful wholesale business, which had been the history of the company. It's fairly recent that we have also moved to a direct-to-consumer experience. We want both, we value both, and we want to advance both. What we think of as data is actually not only the direct-to-consumer experience. Everything around us is data. This conversation, because you're recording it digitally, will become data. Anything that digital becomes data, data fuels artificial intelligence makes digital experiences and omnichannel experiences even smarter and better. So direct to consumer helps us gather more data, but it's not the only reason we want to do that. We really just want to make sure that we have our brand and provide the experience and offer the product wherever our fans want to buy it.
Plus, I think you have enough power as a brand and as a legacy brand to tell your story through, third-party retailers or through D2C in a way that you so choose, right? So it's not like a little startup that's just trying to gain market share. It's an established company that has a story to tell and that a lot of people are already familiar with, which is helpful, I imagine.
Absolutely. And what it also is very helpful, and one of the reasons I joined Levi's, is exactly this history of 168 years of existence. We have persevered through 2 world wars and 2 pandemics and countless other challenges and opportunities. And with 168 years worth of history, there's 168 years worth of data that very few companies in the world have in any industry. And part of our aspiration is actually to harness this data as well. We know things that others don't. We know how the American consumer's waistline has changed over the past 200 years, for example.
It's fun. It seems to me that fit is such an important thing when you think about data and how do you service the customer better and how do you find a way to, just make sure maybe that there are less returns or people have greater satisfaction with what they pick. Can your discipline be used to improve fit or service the customer better and have a more seamless transaction with less returns and all of that fun stuff?
The answer is yes. And I often say that the great thing about data is you can do so much with it. The bad thing about data is you can do so much with it. So you have to focus. But there are 3 broad areas where data and digital and AI as an integrated capability help us a lot. The first one is always the consumer experience. We always want to deepen that connection. We always want to provide something special. Fit will be part of that, but also visual search, which is something we just introduced, where consumers can upload a picture of something that they like, and we can service them similar products that are manufactured by Levi's that they will enjoy.
That can be any type of product?
Any type. We just launched it this month in November in the United States. Okay. And what excites me about the kind of data that Levi's has is that it's pictures, it's images, it's not personally identifiable information, even though if we use consumer data, it's always with their permissions, always to make, you cannot delight the customer if you don't first protect them. So that's one area where we do a lot with data and AI, but then other areas include our internal efficiencies, automating anything that can be automated, optimizing our pricing and shipment and supply chain, and fully transforming the way in which we do our demand planning. That is something that I'm very excited about. And then the whole third area where we're applying digital and data and AI capabilities is to think about new business models and new revenue streams, because we are actively telling our consumers, buy better, wear longer. We are the anti-fast fashion company. So because of the brand that we have, we also have opportunities to become digital platforms.
There's sometimes people, I think, don't think enough about the supply chain and the logistics and the things that aren't sexy but yet impact the consumer in a major way. I'm not sure if I read this or if I made this up, but that you're using some data to even inform that people purchase different SKUs in different geolocations. So, I mean, what are some of the ways that you can, essentially service the customer by looking at data and observing and doing better planning as a result of that?
Yeah, actually, I think that's very sexy.
Well, me too, clearly, yeah.
Because it also helps with sustainability, and Levi's has always aspired to be a very sustainable company, even before everyone else was talking about it. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, we proudly call ourselves the anti-fast fashion company because we do want to be good citizens of the planet. But the sexy part of being able to precisely predict what will sell to whom, where, at what price, is that one, you retain your financial health as a company because you don't have to discount, and at the same time, you are eliminating waste. So therefore, you are a better planet citizen.
You mentioned kind of like how data accumulation, it can be for good or for bad, right? And I think that when you think about the first-party data acquisition, a lot of people are thinking about it through the lens of third-party cookie deprecation and the Apple, privacy regime and how that's different. I'm just wondering, how have those changes or those pending changes affected Levi's strategy, if at all? And then also, how can you mitigate against it by building a better customer profile? Accumulating this data to better service the customer.
I've been a huge advocate for privacy by design pretty much for my entire career. It's really critical. As I mentioned earlier, you cannot delight your consumers if you don't protect them. And what's great about this industry is that so much of the data we use that is very helpful to us is actually not consumer data. It's images, it's products, it's trends, it's epidemiological models, it's climate developments, market predictions. All of that is data. Sensors from delivery trucks, that's data. Cameras in stores without any facial recognition, but they show us how people move around in the physical stores, that's data.
But so then does this become, and this is something that I've heard from people, which is that, even people on the data accumulation side, like on your side, is that there's so much data and that maybe we spend more time figuring out how to accumulate all of it rather than figuring out which ones are the critical data points in order to better service the customer. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. I always start with the application of the data rather than accumulation of data. When you have your priorities in terms of, and I've had this motto of think big, start small, scale fast. So it's important to prioritize, to the point earlier about there's so much good stuff you can do with data, and it's also bad because there's so much you can do with data, so you must prioritize. But what we do is to ensure that we have some use cases and applications. Even use cases is no longer relevant because we're building a capability, we're not building use cases. This is not about proofs of concepts. This is about changing how a company and ultimately an industry operates. So when we first design the applications, we don't aspire to have a beautiful data lake or a beautiful data ocean. We just want to make sure we have our business priorities. We want to increase accuracy in demand planning. We want to personalize the experience of our consumers online. We want to enroll more members in our loyalty thredUP program in the US, which we did. And in a matter of just a few months, we enrolled 5 million people, all thanks to the combination of more data than ever before and the application of machine learning to that. But the point is, we have specific applications in mind, and then we get the data to help us achieve those goals, and over time we get more data, but we're not waiting to build this beautiful, pristine repository of data and then apply machine learning to that.
Well, it sounds like, and not to put words in your mouth, but that you're thinking objectives first, and then what do you need in order to accomplish that objective?
Chief Digital, Chief Data Officer, these are new titles that people are using, that companies are starting to invest in, but the vast majority of them still fail, Jeremy, because people don't have that very pragmatic mindset of let's show the wins very quickly and then build toward that big vision.
Success metrics. How do you know that what you're doing is working? Like you're trying to, use AI and ML to power the Levi's brand.
We have a profit and loss goal every year. And I say we because nobody can do this alone. Even the most sophisticated algorithm is meaningless if it's not implemented. So the strategy and AI team cannot achieve any meaningful financial results without partnering with our sales teams, without our marketing teams, e-commerce teams, retail teams, etc. So we do this together, but we do have a P&L every year, and we contribute a significant amount of financials, revenues for the company, a combination actually of revenues, margin, and cost savings, all of which are important. And within that, we measure everything that we deploy. We look at the lifts that we are able to drive, whether it's uplift in conversion or opening of personalized messaging versus mass marketing in the past, but also increase in accuracy of our demand predictions. That is very, very important. Also saving us a lot of money. For example, one of our distribution center employees who was trained in machine learning designed a model that predicts the likelihood of equipment in a distribution center to fail in the next 4 weeks. She further created an app that automatically dispatches technicians to provide preventive maintenance, which now helps us save what used to be millions of losses in labor costs that we used to pay but were unproductive, as well as millions of losses in not being able to fulfill customer orders because of this downtime of failed equipment. So all of this we measure, and all of that accumulates together with our partners throughout the business into our P&L.
As we're heading into 2022, what are some technologies or initiatives that you're particularly excited about piloting or trialing, that are on the horizon?
Well, I'm very excited about the application of computer vision in this industry. And that helps us in many ways. It helps us predict demand. It helps us provide the surge that consumers want to if we want to help them look for the things that they aspire to buy from us. So computer vision is something that I'm very excited about this year and in the future. Another thing that excites me a lot is this blend of physical and digital experiences, whether you call it omnichannel or metaverse, whatever you want to choose it. The fact is, it's been happening for years. It's something we talked about in the 90s when I was doing my PhD, and it's eye-opening now to see it actually happening. And then with that, 5G, which is really coming. It's all over the world now, so that's going to make these kinds of experiences even faster and more accessible, and will transform every industry even more.
That's it for today's episode. I'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode of the Behind the Numbers Brand Anatomy. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by thredUP.